Welcome to the Cybersecurity Simplified podcast, where we take the mystery out of today's top security threats and solutions. If it isn't enough that hospitals have been overrun with COVID patients during the pandemic, they also have been targeted by cyber criminals. Many have even been forced to cancel vital medical services because their systems, software, or networks are disabled. It is more important than ever for healthcare organizations to keep their networks healthy. In this episode of Cybersecurity Simplified, we will get a prescription for good cyber hygiene from our special guest, Sunila Thelma Levi, a healthcare technologies executive at Commonspirit Health. And which I didn't know, it happens to be the second largest healthcare system in the U.S. Hi there, I'm your co-host, Susanna Song.
And I'm Dave Barton.
Hi.
Welcome. Hi, Sunila.
Hey, Suzanne. Hey, David.
Good. Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Sunila, before we ask you any questions around the vertical of healthcare, tell us a little bit about yourself. Like I teased, you work for a very large healthcare system in our country. Tell us a little bit about your job and about where you work.
Thank you, Suzanne. Yes, I'm very thankful for the opportunities that have been given. I just feel like I'll age myself here, but grew up in IT, feel like I grew up in IT and grew up from IT development background, and then just grew up into architect and director of enterprise architect. And like you said, big organizations like being deputy CTO for Texas Health and Human Services Commission with 55,000 employees and entire state of Texas, providing medical services for entire state of Texas. And then as a CIO and CTO for Integral Care, a mental health organization, and now currently at Commonspirit as VP for digital platform strategies. So very thankful for the opportunities to see how the systems are built. How should we be thinking around the systems? How do you build the systems ground up? Who are the things we are building for? Keeping the customer in mind, keeping the patient in mind. Is it a patient? Is it a consumer? Is it a user? So thinking about all those and how do we safeguard that patient from ground up, building the systems. And then the bigger the organization, bigger the challenges, bigger the challenges of security. So thinking around that, how do we safeguard? But at the heart of it, how do we safeguard the patient and the consumer that we are serving? So with that in mind, so just thankful for the opportunities to learn and grow and build systems that will best meet the consumer needs.
Yeah, we're privileged to have you on as a guest and as a co-host, if you will. In your digital transformation journey, you mentioned safeguarding, right? You've got patients to safeguard the system. There's lots of research happening. How important has it been to implement cybersecurity measures and risk mitigation strategies as you roll out the digitization rather of the hospital system there?
I would say it has been the foremost important to consider cybersecurity measures and risk mitigation in planning out the strategy. So my role as digital strategist, when I'm looking at the core system strategies or digital core system, meaning the EHR, electronic health record, that stores the patient data, while defining the strategies around core systems or defining the strategies from portals or for mobile devices, those digital transformation that's happened during COVID, where we have to push all our services to virtual. So when I'm planning those, be it mobile devices, portal technologies, virtual health on demand, or contact center services, cybersecurity measures, starting with that strong patient and consumer or user authentication, starting with that user authentication as aspect, and then having controls across the data or systems has been the paramount. You cannot define a system or design a system strategy without addressing security. Security measures throughout the life cycle, and looking at how is the patient accessing, how is the patient journeying or consumer journey takes place, and identifying the risk and then putting the mitigation strategies should be crucial and has been crucial. So I would say we can build the digital, the experience has been we can build the digital systems and provide digital strategies that meet the gold standard for the consumer. But if we don't address the security, and if there is a single breach of the patient data or single breach that exposes our organization, then that gold standard of meeting consumer access is gone. So yes, we can design the systems to meet the gold standard, but then if security is not addressed, and the breach can risk it all. So I would say, to answer your question, that it has been paramount. It's not just the consumer gold standard, but it's also organization costs. On average, I think I recently read 9.9 million it costs on average an organization to come out of that breach. So it's the gold standard of consumer, and it's the organizational cost which we need to address while defining those strategies. Does that make sense?
That's great. I talk about this a lot. We in the cyberspace, we have to be right 100% of the time, right? And the bad guys only have to be right once. And how does that influence, when you talk about designing systems and your architecture, how does that influence the decisions you make? Because I talk to healthcare organizations. There's a large one in Missouri that I'm talking to, and they struggle with IoT, right? And how do you handle systems that you can't put controls around, like an MRI machine that's on the network, or whatever the healthcare device might be? What are you thinking? What's your strategy around handling that IoT?
Thank you, David. That's another big. So if you have
No, it's a great question, because I'm still trying to answer it myself. So I wanted to get your view.
I think I think money's question, or money's, if we are putting a strategy together, if we have to, for the organization, when I'm working on a strategy, yes, you could address it from the patient perspective and the gold standard of access and all those things. Am I building the system for patient and addressing the risks and cybersecurity there, threats there? But then the second is that hospital systems, being the biggest hospital system in the US, thinking about those IoT medical devices.
Right.
That's another big risk for hospital systems. I think I'm telling you, 55%, I think there are an increase in cybersecurity threats around IoT devices and devices themselves. So when I'm putting the strategy, and when me and my team are working on the strategy, we go back to the simples, like you said. What are the things that we need to address? Integration, knowing our assets. First thing is knowing our assets.
Sure.
Do we really know our assets across the organization? Imagine hospitals in multiple states, in multiple. Right. And not just states, in cities, multiple facilities in a city, in one city. So how do we really know? Do we know all our assets? Do we, certify those assets? Are those assets certified themselves? What approval, FDA approvals are they bringing in? So knowing our assets, knowing about the asset, knowing what's in our asset is first thing, I think, first thing. And then where do we touch those assets? What are the integration aspects? So I think I boiled it down to 7 different domains: the integration aspect of it, the asset knowing aspect of it, then also about the security aspect of it, the risks aspect of it. So 7 different domains that we laid out, and then addressing those domains are the people, process, technology address. So it's not that we figured out everything.
No.
but at least addressing what we know.
Okay.
You're exactly right. We should be 100%, proof, 100% proof, but we can only be 100% proof with the known things. That
Right.
one unknown thing, but at least I think for me, it's how can I control the known threats and then be agile to address the unknowns.
Okay.
How can I be composable and how can I be agile enough to address the unknowns?
Right. Okay, that's fair. So for our listeners, there's probably folks who hear about threats in healthcare, but they don't understand the big picture, right? If you think about what's a credit card record worth, and it's about 22 cents, maybe $1, right? Because when Susanna's credit card gets stolen, she calls the bank, they get rid of it, they give her a new one, and there's no risk. There's very little risk. The average healthcare record cost is about $250. So for our listeners, you're talking about a factor of 200,000%, or my math's not great this morning, but it's a huge deal because you and we can't change our healthcare records. We're stuck, right? From the time we're born until the time we die, our records go with us. And if somebody steals that, they've got everything.
Yep.
So how does that, and do when you're talking to board level executives about healthcare risk, do they understand, and how do you communicate that risk with them? Because our listeners are going to ask that same question. Well, how do I get my boss to understand, or how do I get my CEO to understand the bigger picture? So tell me your approach there.
So I think there is knowledge of the world. Because of the world we live in, there is a knowledge of fraud that's happening. So I don't think it's a monumental task to prove to somebody that there are bad players at hand. But you need to get your we need to know what we are communicating to our board.
Sure.
So I wouldn't say it's a hard task, but you need to communicate the clear facts around the fraud that's happening. That's the first thing. So, and then and to build on that fact, medical record is the only one that has the complete person information. Financial has a piece of it.
Sure.
Any other, if you go and steal, if the bad person steals a credit card, they'll only get piece of information.
That's right.
If they go and steal maybe car dealers record system, they'll only get piece of information. But a person's medical record has full patient information, full person's information.
Exactly, right.
And it's called PII, patient identification information, personal identification information, right? PII and PHI, person health information. That's what it's so expensive. That's why it's so expensive. And there are, I think last year I was reading about Cyber Peace Institute's report, and 10 million records have been stolen. Medical records have been stolen.
Outrageous.
Yes, right. With the full patient information record, identification information, PII information. So imagine the wealth of information there. That's the identity fraud, that you're talking about.
Right.
So I think communicating that fact, saying, hey, hospital board members, hospital leaders, your data asset is this much worth, 250 times 10 million records.
That's a pretty good payday.
Yes, right. The volume. So I would say the cost of the data and the volume of the data clearly paints the picture to the board, saying, hey, this is our data asset. How can we control, how can we put right measures, right controls to protect our data? And then the cost of the data, but also the cost of reputation. When that breach happens, the reputation loss, the fines that we need to pay.
Right.
I'm telling you, every week I see on average of 7.3 million to 9.9 million in fines that organization bears. A single. So it's not just the fines, it's the reputation as well, and the loss and the services, disruption of services. So how is it impacting our organization? So communicating the facts about how it will impact our organization and how much we need to control it, and then simply knowing how can we address it. When you go to the board and talk to them, you don't just go with the problems, right? And how do we solve it?
That's
So
right.
I would say understand the threats, first one. Second is know your organization and where is your organization, especially in providing the control, in meeting putting those controls. 79 of our organizations almost have 1,000 ghost users.
Wow.
Are we closing that? 50% of our organizations have 1,000 files open to our every employee. Are we addressing that?
Right.
So there are a lot of gaps that we could close. So we could go to the board members and say, hey, this is what it's going to cost, knowing putting our organization before them, putting our controls that we can do, closing the gaps, and then saying this is the funding need or whatever is needed to start securing it.
Got
So
it.
first is three simple points, right? Understand the threats, know your organization, and then start to secure.
Yeah,
Okay.
that sounds like good security hygiene.
Yep. It's like if you take your house, right? You don't want to keep your doors open. You know what's inside the house, what is the value of your house, if you have an empty house, you don't care keeping the door open.
Right.
But
Right.
you know the value of the house, your family, your people are the most important, and the information about. So understanding, giving them the analogy, communicating that, understanding the threats, knowing your environment, and then starting to secure it. And there
100%.
and then also I would say I struggle, David, like you said initially, as a CIO, CTO. In my CIO, CTO role, I didn't know where to start. Yes, I know there are threats. I know where the gaps are, but then how do we address them? How do we start to secure them? And there are a lot of frameworks. There are lots of. I think the industry has matured. The healthcare industry in general has matured. They know the threat. They know where they are. They know that they need to close the gaps. Now, how do we start to secure it? I think that's where we need to collaborate, know what the frameworks are. Are we addressing it with point solutions, or are we addressing with
Right.
holistically? Connected systems. Right now, we are in a world of connected systems. So are we looking at it holistically and looking at it throughout the life cycle? What frameworks are we using? What's the government reform, especially with government organization? Healthcare industry is highly regulated. HIPAA,
High trust. Yep.
Yes. So how are we addressing those frameworks, the compliance across those frameworks? I think there is a lot of things that can be done, and also collaboration with leaders and point solution leaders as well, connected solution leaders, and coming together to learn and address this.
Yeah, you definitely need your board and your executives on board with you, right? As a digital leader, CISO in the IT department, you can't do it by yourself. You've got to get everybody involved.
Yep. I think HHS has a very good saying, if I remember right. Cybersecurity is about patient security, Susan. But it also underlies the organization security, because organization is supporting the patient security. So like you said, it's everybody from the board level to everybody in the organization, the awareness aspect, the training aspect, and then the controls and the measures, thinking about it holistically. So in the end, it's cybersecurity is patient security, but underneath that, the layers is the supporting organization, and the employees are behind that organization.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Sunila. David, any final thoughts? Like you said, you talk with a lot of healthcare partners and providers.
And I think this is similar to what Sunila was thinking. Healthcare may be one of the hardest areas to protect. You've got devices that I can't put agents on. You've got um, very critical data that everybody wants. And you've got a need to protect that data, but you're competing with the budgets for the rest of the hospital systems. And it's tough. It is probably one of the most thankless jobs out there. So for all of you listeners who are in the healthcare space, protecting your organizations, we appreciate what you do. And we know it's a hard road that you travel. Having said that, there's a ton of reward when you do bat 100% or when you do bat 1,000%. So, keep up the good fight. Sunila, thank you so much for your perspective and your insight. Again, healthcare is not changing. It's going to continue to be regulated. It's going to continue to be a demand for the data. And we just have to be better. We just have to continue to grow our skill set, grow our employee base. The thing I'd push everybody is cybersecurity is not just about me and Susanna and Sunila. It's everybody in the organization. And just keep doing what you're doing. I really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sunila. And thank you to our listeners for joining us. If you have feedback about today's podcast or questions for David, myself, or even Sunila, please contact us at podcast@highwirenetworks.com or just leave a comment for us. And be sure to join us for our next episode, Riding the Cyber Trails with Cyber Rancher Alan Alford. Until next time, I'm Susanna Song.
And I'm Dave Barton.
And this is Cybersecurity Simplified. From all of us here at Overwatch by Highwire Networks, thank you for listening. We'll catch you next time on the Cybersecurity Simplified podcast. To learn more, visit us at highwirenetworks.com/podcast.